monster-eating machines
Hey, left foot! Oh!
with a hunger that knows no bounds.
Off the coast of Australia, a massive great white shark known as Shark Alpha vanished into the dark. She was 9 feet of pure muscle, yet something in the abyss hunted her down. When her tracking tag was found washed ashore, it revealed a terrifying story. A sudden plunge into the deep and a temperature spike that could only mean one thing. She had been eaten. Marine biologists have finally found the killer, and the truth is more haunting than fiction. The great white predator. The mystery began in the deep, cold waters of the Southern Ocean, a place where the great white is supposed to be the undisputed king. For years, scientists had been tracking a healthy, 9-foot female shark they called Shark Alpha. She was the perfect specimen, a dominant predator that moved with confidence through the waves. They had attached a sophisticated tracking tag to her dorsal fin to study her migratory patterns, expecting to see her patrol the coast and hunt seals. But then, the signal did something impossible. The data showed that Shark Alpha was cruising along at a normal depth when she suddenly took a sharp, vertical dive. She didn't just dive. She plummeted nearly 2,000 feet straight down into the pitch-black twilight zone of the ocean. In the span of a few seconds, the temperature recorded by the tag skyrocketed from 46 degrees to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. There is only one place in the freezing depths of the Australian coast where the temperature is that high, inside the stomach of a living creature. This was the moment the vanished great white mystery was born. It was a realization that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Something out there had managed to hunt, kill, and consume one of the most feared predators on the planet. For months, the data from that tag was the most terrifying document in marine biology. It wasn't just a record of a death, it was a record of a conquest. Scientists began to whisper about a super predator, a ghost of the abyss that was so large and so powerful that a 9-foot great white was nothing more than a snack. The hunt for the killer began with a process of elimination that felt like a script from a horror movie. At first, researchers looked at the usual suspects. Could it have been a larger great white? Cannibalism is known to happen in the shark world, but the math didn't add up. To maintain an internal body temperature of 78 degrees while diving 2,000 feet deep into near-freezing water, the attacker would have had to be gargantuan. We are talking about a shark so massive it would dwarf anything ever filmed by a camera crew. Estimates suggested a colossal great white would need to be over 16 feet long and weigh over 2 tons to produce that kind of thermal signature. While sharks that big do exist, like the famous deep blue, they rarely venture that deep for a hunt. The behavior of the tag was also strange. After the temperature spike, the tag stayed at that heat for several days, moving up and down the water column in a way that suggested the predator was patrolling a specific territory. It wasn't a hit and run. It was a settled, confident hunter that stayed in the area of the kill. This led some to speculate about even more fantastic monsters. Was it a surviving megalodon? A giant squid? The internet caught fire with theories about ancient sea monsters returning from the depths to reclaim their throne. But marine biologists prefer facts over folklore, and they knew they had to look closer at the biology of the giants we already know. They began to cross-reference the movement patterns of the tag with every known species in the area. As the investigation deepened, the focus shifted toward a very specific type of predator that most people overlook because it stays so far from the surface. The data pointed toward a massive, older great white. But the way it hunted suggested a level of strategy that was almost human. This Predator X wasn't just big, it was smart. It had waited for Shark Alpha to move into a vulnerable position before striking from below, a classic great white tactic, but executed on another great white. The most interesting part of this mystery isn't just that the shark died, but what it revealed about the hidden hierarchy of the ocean. We like to think of the ocean as a wide open space where big fish eat little fish, but it is actually a highly structured kingdom with strict borders. When Shark Alpha crossed an invisible line into the territory of a larger, older matriarch or patriarch shark, she was viewed not as a peer, but as a competitor or a meal. This discovery changed how we view the great white. They aren't just mindless killing machines. They are animals that live in a state of constant, high-stakes tension. Even the giants have to look over their shoulders. The terrifyingly real predator turned out to be a massive version of the very animal we were studying, proving that in the ocean, the only thing a great white has to fear is a bigger great white. However, as the scientists were closing the case on Shark Alpha, a new and even more disturbing mystery began to unfold on the other side of the world. In the waters of South Africa, the great whites weren't just being eaten one by one, they were vanishing by the hundreds. This wasn't a case of a single cannibal king protecting his turf. This was a total exodus. One day, the bays were full of sharks, and the next, they were empty. The silence in the water was deafening. When the bodies did start to wash up, they didn't look like they had been attacked by another shark. They looked like they had been dissected. Their bodies were intact, except for one thing. Their massive, oil-rich livers had been removed with almost surgical precision. The rest of the shark was left to rot, untouched by scavengers. This was a new kind of terror, a predator that didn't just want to eat, it wanted to harvest. This shift in the narrative moved the mystery away from the super shark and toward an intelligence that was even more formidable. The biologists realized that while a bigger shark might be the king of the abyss, there was another creature that had mastered the art of the kill in a way that made the great white look like an amateur. This realization brought a sense of dread to the research teams. If a 16-foot shark could be hunted and hollowed out by another animal, then our understanding of the ocean's food chain was completely wrong. We had spent decades putting the great white at the top of the pyramid, but the data was showing us that they were merely in the middle. The vanished great white wasn't just a story about death, it was a story about a changing of the guard. The ocean was shifting, and a new power was rising to the surface, one that used teamwork, strategy, and a terrifying knowledge of shark anatomy to clear the waters. The scientists had solved the mystery of Shark Alpha, but they had stumbled into a much larger war, a war where the most famous predator in history was losing. But the ocean floor holds secrets that even the most advanced technology can barely touch. The Orca invasion, the disappearance of the great whites in South Africa's Gansbaai and False Bay wasn't a gradual decline, it was a sudden, panicked retreat. These locations were world-famous for being the capital of the great white world, places where tourists flocked to see the giants breach the water. But in 2017, the sharks simply stopped showing up. This was the start of the Orca invasion, led by two specific whales that marine biologists named Port and Starboard. These weren't your average killer whales. You could identify them instantly by their collapsed dorsal fins, one leaning to the left and the other to the right, giving them a jagged, pirate-like appearance. They were a specialized duo of assassins that had moved into the region and begun a systematic slaughter of the local shark population. What shocked the world wasn't just that they were killing great whites, but how they were doing it. When the first shark carcasses washed ashore, the scientists were baffled. The sharks had huge, gaping holes between their pectoral fins, but the rest of their muscular bodies were left completely alone. It was as if someone had used a giant scalpel to remove the liver and nothing else. The biological reason for this is as fascinating as it is gruesome. A great white shark's liver is its most valuable asset. It is massive, often weighing hundreds of pounds, and is packed with squalene, a high-energy oil that provides incredible caloric value. To an orca, the liver is a superfood bar. The whales had discovered a way to maximize their energy intake while minimizing the effort of a fight. They didn't want the tough, sandpaper-like skin or the bony cartilage of the rest of the shark. They only wanted the gold inside. To get it, the orcas utilized a terrifying bit of physics called tonic immobility. They would ram the shark from the side, flipping it onto its back. When a shark is turned upside down, its brain enters a state of temporary paralysis. It cannot fight, it cannot swim, it can barely breathe. While the shark was frozen in this trance, the orcas would work together to tear open the chest cavity and squeeze the liver out like toothpaste from a tube. The precision was so extreme that scientists found the bite marks matched the orcas' dental patterns perfectly. This wasn't just a random act of nature, it was a highly evolved, learned hunting technique. The arrival of port and starboard didn't just kill a few sharks, it broke the entire ecosystem. Great whites are what we call apex predators, but they are also incredibly sensitive to the smell of death. When an orca kills a great white and the liver is removed, the remaining carcass releases a chemical signal, a scent of fear, into the water. This signal travels for miles, warning every other shark in the area that a killer is on the loose. The result was a total flight response. Within days of a kill, every great white in the region would vanish. They would abandon their primary hunting grounds and flee hundreds of miles away, sometimes not returning for years. This created a massive problem for the local environment. Without the sharks to keep the seal populations in check, the seals began to overgraze on fish, leading to a collapse in the local fishing industry. The vanished great white mystery proved that the ocean is a delicate house of cards, and 2 clever whales were enough to knock the whole thing down. Marine biologists were stunned by the speed of this takeover. We used to think of orcas and great whites as 2 giants that largely avoided each other, like lions and tigers in different parts of a forest. But port and starboard proved that orcas are the undisputed masters of the sea. They are larger, faster, and, most importantly, they hunt in teams. A great white is a solitary hunter, a lonely king on a throne. An orca is a soldier in a highly disciplined army. The whales used acoustic communication to coordinate their strikes, ensuring that the shark never had a chance to use its famous bite. They turned the ocean's most feared predator into prey. This discovery forced us to redefine the great in great white. They are magnificent, yes, but they are vulnerable to the superior intelligence and social structure of the cetacean world. The mystery of why the sharks vanished was solved, but it left us with a chilling realization. The top of the food chain is a much more crowded and violent place than we ever imagined. As the whales continued their patrol, the sharks didn't just hide. They started showing up in places they had never been seen before. They were pushed into shallower, warmer waters, closer to beaches used by humans. The Orca effect was literally redrawing the map of the ocean. Biologists began to see that the disappearance of the sharks was a form of ecological displacement. The sharks were becoming refugees in their own home. This wasn't just about hunger. It was a war for territory. Port and starboard weren't just eating, they were clear-cutting the competition. Every time they killed a shark, they were sending a message to the rest of the species. This water belongs to us now. The terrifying reality is that this behavior is spreading. Other orcapods have been observed watching port and starboard, learning their techniques, and beginning to target sharks in other parts of the world. We are witnessing the birth of a new era of oceanic predation. The study of these 2 whales has given us a rare glimpse into the evolution of hunting. It shows that nature is not static. It is always learning. The mystery of the vanished great white was ultimately a story of an old king being overthrown by a smarter, more organized rival. The orcas didn't need to be bigger than the super shark of the Australian abyss. They just needed to be more strategic. They found the great white's off switch and used it to dismantle an entire population. This shift has left the scientific community wondering what comes next. If the great whites continue to flee, who will fill the void they leave behind? And if the orcas continue to specialize in shark killing, will they eventually run out of prey? The ocean is currently a theater of war, and we are just beginning to understand the tactics being used in the dark. This wasn't just a random attack, it was a targeted assassination. Cannibal King. While the orcas are the headline-grabbing assassins of the surface, a darker, more ancient threat lurks in the deep that explains why some great whites vanish without a single whale in sight. This is the reality of the Cannibal King. In the world of sharks, there is no such thing as family loyalty. Size is the only currency that matters. Marine biologists have long known that sharks eat other sharks, but the scale of this intraspecies violence is much larger than we once believed. When a massive older great white enters a hunting ground, it doesn't just compete with the smaller sharks. It often removes them from the equation entirely. This creates a hierarchy of horror, where the most dangerous thing a 9-foot great white can encounter isn't a human or a boat, but a 20-foot great white that has been patrolling the same waters for 50 years. This internal warfare is a primary reason for the sudden vanishing of sharks from specific hotspots. In places like Guadalupe Island or the Farallon Islands, researchers have observed that when a truly massive individual, a shark like the legendary Deep Blue, arrives, the smaller sharks don't just act nervous, they disappear. They move into deeper, less optimal hunting grounds just to stay out of the path of the giant. This is biological common sense. A large great white can weigh 5,000 pounds and exert a bite force that can crush a small car. For a younger shark, being in the same vicinity as one of these kings is like a civilian walking through a live fire zone. The mystery of the vanished sharks is often just a case of displacement by intimidation. The king arrives and the subjects flee, but sometimes they don't flee fast enough. The case of Shark Alpha in Australia proved that these encounters aren't always about intimidation, they are about predation. A massive great white has a massive caloric need. Tracking data has shown that these giants will dive deep into the darkness to ambush smaller sharks from below, using the same breaching technique they use on seals, but at 1,000 feet deep. This is a terrifying thought. A 20-foot monster lurking in the pitch black, waiting for its own kind to swim by. This cannibalism serves two purposes. First, it provides a massive, fat-rich meal. Second, it eliminates a future competitor. By eating a smaller great white, the giant ensures that the local seal population remains its exclusive buffet. The evidence for this is written in the scars of the survivors. Almost every mature great white filmed by scientists carries love bites or combat scars from other sharks. These aren't just from mating, they are the result of violent territorial disputes. The vanished great white mystery often boils down to a simple, brutal fact. The ocean is a finite space with finite food. If a massive shark decides a bay is hers, she will clear it. Biologists call this interference competition. It's a polite way of saying that the big guys bully the little guys until they leave or die. This behavior keeps the gene pool strong, as only the fastest and most cautious sharks survive to reach those massive sizes. What makes this cannibalistic behavior so riveting is the stealth involved. Unlike an orca attack, which is loud, social, and leaves a mess of blood and oil on the surface, a shark-on-shark kill is often silent and deep. There are no witnesses. There is no liver floating on the waves. The victim simply disappears from the tracking screen, swallowed whole or torn apart in the dark. This is why it took so long for biologists to solve the mystery of Shark Alpha. They were looking for a new monster, when the real monster was a bigger version of the one they were already studying. The predator was terrifyingly real because it was the ultimate version of itself. This hierarchy creates a phantom population of sharks. We see the ones that come to the surface and interact with our boats, but the truly massive kings often stay deeper and further out to sea, only coming in to feed or assert dominance. When they do, the impact is like a nuclear blast in the ecosystem. The sudden silence that follows their arrival is a testament to the respect and fear they command. The mystery of the vanished great white isn't always a mystery of death, but a mystery of fear. The fear that a bigger, older, and more hungry version of yourself is watching from the shadows. Size matters in the dark, but intelligence is the ultimate weapon. Flight response. While the physical presence of a giant shark or a pod of killer whales is terrifying, the most haunting reason great whites vanish is something we cannot see. It is a biological alarm system known as the flight response, triggered by a chemical signal that turns the ocean into a ghost town. When a great white is killed, especially when its liver is ripped out by an orca, its body releases specific chemicals called necromones. This is the scent of death, and to a shark, it is the most frightening smell in the world. It is an invisible message that screams one thing: a predator is here that can kill the unkillable. Scientists discovered the power of this scent almost by accident. They noticed that when they used certain chemical compounds derived from decaying shark tissue, every living shark in the area would flee in a matter of seconds. In the wild, This creates a massive dead zone. When port and starboard kill a shark in a bay, the water becomes saturated with these necromones. The effect is immediate and total. Every great white in the vicinity, regardless of how big or dominant they are, will turn tail and swim as fast as possible in the opposite direction. They don't just move to the next bay, they often travel thousands of miles to entirely different regions, such as moving from the coast of South Africa all the way to the waters near Australia. This isn't just a temporary hiding spot. They stay away for months or even years until the chemical memory of that death has faded from the environment. This ecology of fear is what makes the great white's disappearance so riveting to marine biologists. We used to think of these sharks as fearless, the ultimate kings who feared nothing. But the data proves they are actually highly sensitive and prone to panic. This flight response is a survival mechanism that has kept the species alive for millions of years. By fleeing at the first hint of a peer's death, they avoid becoming the next victim. However, for us looking from the surface, it looks like a vanishing act. One day the water is teeming with life, and the next, it is a blue desert. The sharks are gone because they have been scented out of their own homes. The science of this fear is being used today to help protect humans and sharks alike. Researchers are developing shark repellents based on these necromones to keep great whites away from busy swimming beaches without harming them. But in the wild, this chemical warfare has serious consequences. When the great whites flee, it changes the entire balance of the ocean. This is called a trophic cascade. Without the top predator around, the mid-level predators like smaller sharks and seals begin to take over. They eat more fish, they change their behavior, and the entire underwater neighborhood changes its character. The vanished great white is more than just a missing animal. It is a missing piece of a complex puzzle that keeps the ocean healthy. This chemical signal is so powerful that it can even affect sharks that weren't there to witness the kill. Because sharks have an incredible sense of smell, able to detect a single drop of blood in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, they can pick up the scent of a dead great white from miles away. The ocean currents act as a delivery system for this bad news. A kill that happens at a deep-sea reef can send a fear plume down the coast, clearing out every shark in its path. This is why the disappearance of Shark Alpha, or the victims of port and starboard, felt so sudden. It wasn't a slow process of the sharks being hunted one by one. It was a mass evacuation triggered by a biological siren. The terrifying reality is that this signal is real-time intelligence for the sharks. They aren't guessing if a predator is near. They have chemical proof. This changes our view of the great white from a lonely monster into a connected part of a sensory network. They are constantly listening to the water with their noses, and when the water tells them to run, they run. This deep-seated instinct is the only thing that can override their hunger and their territorial pride. Even the most aggressive great white knows that when the scent of death is in the water, the game has changed. The king is no longer the hunter, he is the hunted, and his only hope is to disappear into the vastness of the sea. A silent signal is sent through the current, and suddenly the kings are gone. The throne is never empty. The mystery of the vanished great white has taught us a humbling lesson. The ocean is not a static kingdom, but a shifting battlefield where today's king is tomorrow's prey. For decades, we viewed the great white as an invincible force, a monster that lived outside the rules of the natural world. But the data from Shark Alpha's tag and the grisly discoveries in South Africa have pulled back the curtain on a much more complex reality. We now know that the great white is a creature defined as much by its fear as by its power. Whether it is the tactical brilliance of orcas like port and starboard or the crushing dominance of a 20-foot cannibal king from the abyss, the great white is constantly being tested. When they vanish, they aren't just hiding. They are reacting to a world that has become too dangerous even for them. This new understanding changes how we approach ocean conservation. We used to think that to save the great white, we just had to stop people from hunting them. Now we realize we have to protect the entire fear network of the sea. If the orcas are pushed into new territories because of climate change or overfishing, they will continue to displace the sharks. If the giant patriarch sharks are removed by trophy hunters, the smaller sharks may lose the social structure that keeps their population stable. The vanished great white is a biological red flag, a warning that the balance of power in our oceans is under extreme stress. The sharks are the sentinels of the deep, and their sudden absence is a signal that something in the machine is breaking. The most terrifyingly real part of this mystery is the realization that there is always a bigger shadow in the water. For the seals, it is the 9-foot shark. For the 9-foot shark, it is the 20-foot cannibal or the pod of orcas. And for the orcas, we are still learning who or what might haunt their dreams. By solving the mystery of why the great whites disappeared, marine biologists haven't just checked a box in a textbook, they have opened a door to a new era of exploration. We are looking at an ocean that is smarter, more coordinated, and more sensitive than we ever dared to imagine. The great white hasn't lost its majesty, but it has lost its myth of invincibility. As we move forward, the vanished great white will continue to be a symbol of the ocean's enduring mystery. Every time a tracking tag goes dark or a beach suddenly goes quiet, we will wonder which of the predators has claimed the territory. Is it a ghost from the abyss, like the one that took Shark Alpha? Is it a pair of clever whales looking for their next meal? Or is it simply the ocean itself, moving its pieces around a board we are only just beginning to see? The truth is that the ocean does not belong to us, and it certainly doesn't belong to the great white. It belongs to the predator that can adapt, the one that can learn, and the one that knows when to fight and when to flee. The mystery of the vanished great white reminds us of the awe we should feel for the natural world. It is a world that can produce a creature as perfect as a shark, and then produce a way to dismantle it with surgical precision. The predator is real, but it isn't a single monster from a movie. It is the relentless, beautiful, and terrifying process of evolution itself. If you love this kind of content, subscribe to the channel for more.